read a book called Built to Sell by John Warrillow. And I felt that Built to Sell really lit me up. Like it was like a blueprint for success for what I needed to do to get this business to where it needed to go. I then made several methodical changes to make the business more sellable. And in the process, it became a lot more profitable. Built it through, had a number in my mind that I thought I wanted to get to in order to sell. When I thought I wasn't positive I'd get there. I thought I was close enough. In 2020, we grew a lot because people needed a lot of digital help. There was a lot going online and everybody was home and online. So all the eyeballs were there. Brands needed to know how to navigate it. It was very tense times. So we grew a lot. And so after 2020, I really talked to Dave and said, I think we're ready to do this.
Well, Carrie, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. I really appreciate it.
Of course, I'm so happy to be here.
Well, let's dive in. I want to talk about the launch of your agency, Likeable.
The minute Facebook opened up beyond the college market, we had a social media agency. So it was super ahead of the curve there.
Awesome. So what drew you into that business?
Well, it actually was launched on our wedding day, which is a funny story. My husband wanted a larger than life wedding, and he really wanted to invite anyone he's ever known. And I don't mean like just friends from high school. I mean like people who are listening to this Women Who Exit podcast. He would be like, "Hello, everyone, please watch me marry my bride." And I knew that there was nowhere that we were going to be able to hold such a wedding or afford such a wedding especially in New York City, right? And so we had to get creative. We both came from a marketing background, and we ended up pitching the minor league affiliate of the New York Mets, the Brooklyn Cyclones, a minor league baseball team. We bought out the sponsorship for the night. We then resold in sponsors. So instead of like Pepsi tossing t-shirts into the audience, 1-800-Flowers would toss bridal bouquets, and all, cute, campy, and fun. All of it in exchange for providing services for our wedding and donating to charity. We got married on the field after the game in front of 5,000 of our closest friends, family, and strangers, baseball fans alike. And in addition to marrying each other and having this beautiful moment together on the field and a great party in the back and hot dogs and beer and all of the good stuff, we got those sponsors massive amounts of press. So national and international television, worldwide global coverage, print, every medium you could imagine. It was one of the best sponsored events that most of them had ever done. And so they came to us and said, like, "This was amazing. You have to do it again.
You have to get married again."
I was like, "We're not getting married again. We're not having a sponsored baby. But you know what? Maybe we could start a company based on the idea that word of mouth, like a good idea, generates great word of mouth." We really had no agency experience. I guess that kind of would have been PR, right? But we didn't even have that in our repertoire. We were so young. So we opened a word of mouth marketing agency. And we were married in July 2006. We opened in the beginning of 2007. And that is exactly when Facebook opened beyond the college market. And we very, very quickly realized that social media was the fastest form of word of mouth. So we leaned in and marketed ourselves as a social media agency, which caused us an influx of leads and lots and lots and lots of business that we had to learn how to handle through the years.
Awesome. And you had a sales and marketing background prior to that. So it wasn't like a foreign industry for you, right?
Well, I worked in media sales and then I worked on the brand side. But I do think going into starting an agency when you have no agency experience is very challenging. It is a different beast to be an agency person. I was very comfortable on the brand side. And then as a media salesperson, I definitely knew how to sell, which was essential really for the growth of the business. But the lack of agency experience and understanding how to operate an agency, that was hard.
Yeah. And what was your husband's background up until that point, or your fiance's background?
Well, my fiance at the time was a teacher, but he had a very varied career. In addition to being a teacher. Prior to that, he was a reality television show star. And then prior to that, he worked at Radio Disney with me in media sales a little bit. So he had a mix, but he never took a marketing class or anything like that. He was successful though. Definitely, he was the top salesperson in the country when it came to media sales. So he had a good sales skill too. Just like he was finding himself along the way because
Yeah.
he's a born entrepreneur, really, which is what he discovered.
And you had the business 15 or so years?
Yeah. So my husband and I started the business together. It was great because he was the CEO and the visionary and like forward thinking. And I was the COO. I kept everything together. I onboarded the clients. I hired the staff. I figured out the bills, all of that like operational stuff I did. And then 6 years later, he wanted to start another company, a software as a service company. And so we spun that off and I stepped into the role as CEO just 6 years later. So for the first 6 years, I was COO. And then for the remaining about 8, I led the company through to sale. So it was about 14 years before we decided to sell it.
Awesome. So talk to me about this decision, right? Was this something that you and your husband and, anybody else involved in the C-suite had talked about for a while? Did this come out of the blue? Like, talk to me about the process.
Sure. So when Dave ran the business, we weren't really thinking about exit. We were thinking about really fast-paced growth. And when
Mm.
he left the business, it was it was 6 years later. So it was 2013. And there were a few things that were different. First, social media was no longer new. A lot of people did social media in 2013. Second, we had grown so fast, we did not have time to think about being profitable. And third, most of the leaders that I saw in the space who ran agencies like this were men. They were loud,
Mm.
extroverted men, and I didn't feel anything like that. And so I was really at a loss as to what I was going to do with this business. And I knew that I needed to make it profitable because Dave was going to launch something new. And I really wanted to make sure we really made money from that business. But I read a book called Built to Sell by
Mm.
John Warlow. And I felt that Built to Sell really lit me up. Like it was like a blueprint for success for what I needed to do to get this business to where it needed to go. I then made several methodical changes to make the business more sellable. And in the process, it became a lot more profitable. Built it through, had a number in my mind that I thought I wanted to get to in order to sell. When I thought I wasn't positive I'd get there. I thought I was close enough. In 2020, we grew a lot because people needed a lot of digital help. There was a lot going online and everybody was home and online. So all the eyeballs were there. Brands needed to know how to navigate it. It was very tense times. So we grew a lot. And so after 2020, I really talked to Dave and said, I think we're ready to do this. And that's when we ended up partnering with our M&A advisor, and our deal went very quickly. So I'm happy to share that.
Talk about the process a bit. How did you secure the M&A advisor? And just walk us through the process, because I've heard, as I'm sure you have, many stories. Sometimes it goes quick, sometimes it takes a very long time. Talk a bit about that.
There are things that you can control and there are things that you cannot. And one thing you cannot control is the market at the time when you're going to sell and the multiple range. Like your multiple range for your industry is kind of set, and it varies based off of the timing of the economic conditions of the market. I did not time the exit based on that. And yet it was still a very good time to sell in 2021 because money was sort of free flowing and there were lots of incentives. Interest rates were low, all of this stuff. So I ended up interviewing a few M&A advisors. I interviewed investment bankers. I interviewed brokers. I ended up somewhere in the middle at the time with Barney. They were very, very a small shop. They're now called Merge, and they're much bigger. When I partnered with them, I partnered with the founder of that group. And she was a woman. And I felt like she really got my business and that she was a partner with me through that. She did a valuation of the business. We looked at how we would organize the stuff into a data room. And then she put it out there to her buyers that she had within her world. We received a number of LOIs. So that was great. And honestly, it was very, very fast. we signed with her, I believe, in December, and we closed in April. I don't think that that is the case now, but I will share that that was the case for me. And it ended up being a great exit.
Awesome. And who acquired the firm?
We were acquired by 10 Pearls.
Okay, great.
They're
Awesome.
they're a technology firm. So they saw, the reason I love 10 Pearls and love them for Likeable was that they were an end-to-end digital transformation company. So they really focus on the systems and infrastructures for these huge companies for building their digital transformation. Once they build these things and they build all these digital products and all this great stuff, somebody needs to know about it. So the idea that they would acquire Likeable and plug that in as sort of a marketing arm to their organization was really smart. And I felt like I could really add value to that organization. So that was kind of wonderful. If I was going to have to stay, which most founders in an agency space do have to stay for a certain amount of time, if I was going to be in a space where I was staying, I wanted to go somewhere where I could have impact. And I felt like I really could there.
Yeah. And you mentioned prior you had a 3-year earnout, is that right?
Yeah, I worked for the company for 3 years.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So I want to go back to some of the basics for folks that are new to this process. Describe the difference between an M&A firm and a broker, or what are the differences? And when do you choose one or the other?
Okay, so an investment banker is financially licensed to, there are licensing differences in what they do. So that's first and foremost. Those are like the technicals, but I'm going to skip the technicals for a second. So it's investment bankers have a level of licensing that brokers don't in most scenarios. Investment bankers usually handle larger transactions and their fees are much bigger, but they generally command a higher dollar because of that. They'll find the right strategic partner. You have to be a certain size for an investment bank to take you on anyway. If a lot of times their minimum fee can be 7 figures sometimes or high 6. So it's those are generally bigger. We were at the size where we could have done an investment bank, but I felt like we would have been a really small fish in a big pond. Like we would not have been important to them. An M&A advisor is what many people call themselves, and that's somewhere in the middle, right? You can handle things that are a little bigger. And most people have an aversion to the term broker because when you think of a broker, you're thinking of somebody who's like selling very transactional. But many business brokers are great and experts in their craft. I mean, there are brokers that are specific to verticals. You know, if you want to go with somebody like my advisor just worked in marketing agency space. So in marketing services. So for me, that was very valuable because she knew our business inside and out. There are some very good small brokers that operate on a smaller scale so that folks with 6-figure businesses can sell and even more.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, there's I get that question a lot. And even choosing a broker or an advisor or an investment banking firm, to work with somebody or not to work with somebody.
You want someone with experience in your industry. You want somebody who's handled deal sizes around the deal size that you are in. You want someone who gets you. It's a very stressful process. And so having somebody who understands you during that process is really important. You have to click with them because it's very tense. Everything, that process is it can be very tense. So you want to make sure that you have a partner in it with you who understands your non-negotiables.
Makes sense. Awesome. All right. So I love to ask this question. The deal is signed, whatever, that means in regards to, obviously you had an earnout, there was a whole process through it, but the day after the deal is signed, how did you feel waking up the next morning, Carrie?
Well, I can tell you that when the wire hit, I had a very physical reaction. Like I was shaking because really for most business owners, 80% of their net worth is tied up in their business. And you can have a very successful business, but if your business is your net worth is totally tied up there, what happens if something goes wrong with your business or God forbid it's really very challenging. And so all of a sudden I had a safety net. And so for me, I felt a sense of calm and a sense of safety. And, really, really felt like, okay, I can breathe now because whatever I want to do, whether it is like go all in and excel with the company, which I really did and loved for quite some time, or launch my own thing, like I have enough of a nest egg and we've extracted enough value that we can really feel safe. And that to me was the best feeling in the world. I didn't buy anything fancy. We took one family trip to Hawaii. We were mostly focused on the fact that this gave us a level of security to be able to try other new things.
Any lessons learned through the process, albeit the process was quick, but anything where you're like, "Ah, I'm so glad we did it this way," or "Oof, I wish I would have looked at it a different way."
Okay, so without revealing specific parts about my deal, because I think I can give you some good experience shares that I think will be really good. First of all, when we talk about that it was December to April, I find looking back that that's rushed. Like
Mhm.
if I was so afraid through this process, so afraid it wouldn't happen, so afraid it would be the wrong choice, so afraid, oh my goodness, that I really rushed. And I think that when working on something as big as this, take your time. Take your time. Don't be afraid. I'm not like a super detailed person. I'm looking for the fit. I'm looking for how we're going to grow together. I'm a salesperson. Um, Poring over legal documents is not in my forte, but I think it's a good idea when you're doing that to sort of get familiar with that stuff. Not because for me, everything was fine. It all was great. But I do think like lots of times when I had questions later, I would say like, oh, I wonder this. And then I would go back and look and I'd be like, oh, it's in here under this little piece. And like, it's really taking the time to understand it is important. And then the other thing I would say is ask questions. Ask questions. I was so afraid of looking dumb. I was terrified of looking dumb. I didn't want people to judge me. I was a woman, sitting there like a little bit of a deer in headlights. Like I did not understand working capital. And I get an offer and it involves working capital and I just didn't ask the question. Now it ended up being fine. I ended up eventually figuring it out. And of course, my acquirers were awesome. But I think that for me, I didn't like being in a position where I didn't understand something. And so just ask the question, even if it sounds completely ridiculous, ask it and don't be afraid to do so. So speed, slow it down, ask, ask a lot of questions and just really read documents. Don't be afraid to like get into them. Sometimes you get like afraid of digging into details a little.
Talk about the work you're doing now, Carrie, because obviously the Whisper Group is informed by this experience and helping others get through this process.
So after I was acquired, I worked for the acquirer. I actually loved that experience.
Mhm.
I love that
That's
team. And
that is refreshing to hear because I hear
I,
lots of folks who say the opposite.
I did. I had a really good experience. And honestly, it was hard to leave, but
Mm.
I felt a calling. And that was based off of my experience that when I was in the process of selling the business, I felt alone as a woman that I didn't have a lot of other women who exited to help me understand, which is why what the work you're doing is so fantastic, right? We need these stories and we need people to go to. Like when you're negotiating for a raise at work, right? There's lots and lots of women you could go to. When you're doing these things that many people have experienced, there's lots of people you can go to. But to find someone in your network who've actually built something and sold it, let alone built something and sold it in your industry, that's really hard. I got the idea for building the Whisper Group, which was really based on the idea that I was going to build a collective of exited female founders, and I was going to have many of them be advisors for women who are looking to build a business to get exit ready. And that's exactly what I did. And Whisper stands for the 7 tenets of a business that I think makes it ultimately very sellable. Your why, your how, your income, your secret sauce, your profit, your exec team, and your roar factor, which is ultimately like how you're going to present in what is almost always a room full of men who are tearing apart your business from limb to limb. But primarily what I do is I look at women who are looking to build a business that is exit ready so that they can exit when they want to, not when they have to. I also believe that lifestyle businesses are fantastic and we can and should build lifestyle businesses, but they can also be tweaked to truly be life-changing assets. And so what I do is if someone comes to the Whisper Group, I say, we want to get exit ready. There are 3 areas that we work with them on. We call them why, apply, and fly. Why is really helping them decide, helping them figure out financially what they want to sell for and why they want to sell. I don't know if you know this stat, but over 80% of business owners experience regret after they sell. And a lot of times that's because they are not fully prepared for what comes next. They think they want to like be off in the sunset on the beach and then they're so bored. So it's really hard. You're losing like all of your like community and all of it. And so we really helping with the why and determining we're going to exit in this time and ideally for this much based on this multiple. We do evaluation of their business today. That's why. Then apply is really working through a strategic plan with them that we call the Whisper Way to help them get there. And then fly is when we introduce them to either investment bankers, brokers, or advisors of choice, of which we have many in our repertoire. We also have lots of accountants and lawyers and trust and estates attorneys and all different kinds of people to help for when you're getting ready. It is exclusively for women. And I do, the person who executes these on behalf of the Whisper Group is almost always a woman that is in your specific vertical. So if you're selling a cookie company, for instance, you're going to have someone who has sold a food product and, built and sold a food product. If you're an agency, you might be working with me, for instance. So we have a large collective of women. We're up to 150 so far, and we're really excited to be doing that.
What sort of budget should somebody be thinking about to engage with a firm like yours? And then give us the ranges on brokers and M&A firms. What are some of the percentages?
The Whisper Group is a relatively inexpensive spend. And what you're looking at when you spend, it's a low spend for certainly for the Y-gate when you're looking at that. And what you're looking at in terms of the value you get from that is, let's say your valuation multiple is somewhere between 3 to 6x. And let's say we do your valuation today and it's at 4, we're going to tell you what you need to do to get it closer to 6. So the return on that, if you execute against that, is tremendous. And it's, I wanted to keep things very affordable, especially for women business owners, because the more, we're opening businesses at twice the rate of the population. 40% of women are leaving the workforce to start businesses. We're starting them, but we're not thinking about exit because we're just not there yet. It's like that we're still catching up. So I want women to think about exit early and often. And so it's very important to me to keep those prices affordable. For a investment banker or broker, they're going to take a percentage of the fee. If you're looking at an investment banker, they'll usually have a minimum fee. That could be, I've seen lots of different ones, but somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million is a minimum fee. If you're looking at a broker, they're going to take a percentage of the sale. And in the agency space, I can speak to that specifically of the things that I was presented. It was generally like relatively low retainers and then something like 5% of the entire sale or 10% of the upfront. You could choose, any direction of that is usually pretty standard in that space. Other fees vary. It really depends on how big you are. The bigger you are, the smaller the fee. I'll tell you honestly, starting this business on my own has been a bear because I'm used to with Likeable, I had 60 people. When I went to 10 Pearls, there were hundreds of people. So this is back to basics of just, chief janitor in charge, chief tech person, all the things. And so I've intentionally slowed the pace and it sort of got a little away from me because so many women need this service. So I was like, I'm not going to take on any clients. I'm going to wait a little bit. I'm just going to build the community. And then, I fall in love with these women and want to help them. So I would say I'm overwhelmed with business right now, but I am so madly in love with each of these women and their potential and their desire to commit to exit readiness. Like, kudos to them. So right now I'm working with a bunch of agencies. I have a couple of product companies that I'm testing with advisors, but I'm trying to make sure that I build a really, really quality product. And so I'm moving with intention and pace, if that makes sense. I'm proud of every woman who starts a business. It's really, really hard. Only 2% of us get over $1 million in revenue. And I think that one thing to know is just that it's hard. And you read these stories of these huge companies and you feel small, but don't feel small. If you can, like, reframe that, because you're doing the work to build the life that you want. If you want to listen to my podcast, it's the Exit Whisperer, which is great. And wearethewhispergroup.com is my website. And if you want to see the differences in exit values, this is actually a little sad, but we could talk about, these are the differences in exit values and how to change them. So right now, women are extracting just 0.8% of total exit value.
Wow.
That means for every dollar spent on exits, we're getting a penny.
Wow.
Yeah, that's rough. But I do a report on how to, it's actually going to be an annual report on what we can do to change that and close the exit gap. So if you go to closetheexitgap.com, you can download that report.
Fantastic. Carrie, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it.
Of course. I'm so happy to be on. Love the work you're doing.